You're listening to the Jiu Jitsu Lou podcast, and I'm Lou Temlett. I'm guessing you're having a good day because either you've been on the mats, considering getting on the mats, or maybe you're a Jiu Jitsu communicator. I'm so happy you're here listening or watching this episode. Please don't tap out before the end. When you want to start a martial art, start training Jiu Jitsu. I'd like to welcome Dan Strauss to my podcast. Hi Dan, how are you?
Hello, I'm very good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing really good, thank you.
Good.
It was fantastic to see you kind of back of the stage commentating on Polaris 30 on Saturday night. How was that experience for you? Because you've done so many. What was different and new for you at Polaris 30?
Yeah, so it was a good show. It was a long show. We had a lot of matches on, 22 matches altogether, although I didn't do all of the prelims. So it's a little bit too much for me. So I came in about just under halfway through. But yeah, we had a really good show. We had a good crowd and some great athletes on the stage. It was a slightly different role for me this time because when I first started commentating for Polaris, I was doing the color commentary, and we had Tom Barlow and then Josh Palmer was doing play-by-play. Josh is over in the States now, and he's busy with a lot of other shows. So for the last, 10 Polarises or something, I have been taking the play-by-play role, the presenting role, which is a lot harder, a lot more difficult. But we had Alex Wendlin come in to do the presenting for the show for the first time. So I had quite a lot less work to do. I didn't have to do the interviews. I didn't have to do the opener or closer. Yes. So it's a little bit less stress. I could just relax just a little bit more. Still not relax as much as I used to be able to, but I can relax a little bit more.
Okay, so for any listeners, play-by-play, just explain, because obviously that for me is the move by move and keeping your eyes on the action. How difficult has that been through your kind of commentating journey? Because I guess when some people are kind of commentating or not commentating, cornering you at a competition, or you can kind of hear the coach going, do this move, do that move. It's keeping up with it all. And I would be so worried about saying the wrong thing. Tell me about your experience.
We say play-by-play, but, technically these are the roles. But really, the big difference between when I say play-by-play and color, we sort of would do play-by-play and kind of the quote-unquote presenting. So there is a really big difference in the booth between those two roles. One is a lot less enjoyable, for lack of a better word. It's a lot more work. So when I'm doing basically when I've got the lead role on commentary, not only do I have to do the commentary on the actual matches, that's the easy part. The harder part is sort of steering and being aware of everything else that's going on. So the stuff that you don't think about so much. So tail of the tape, talking through the walk-ins, knowing when to throw to ads, knowing when to throw to the MC and stuff like that. So you kind of have to be switched on. As you can probably hear, I'm still getting over a little bit of a cough. So Tom Barlow was covering for me a couple of times that I lost my voice on the mic on Saturday. So it wasn't as hard as it usually is. But on some occasions when I'm doing all of those roles plus opener and post-fight interviews, you're just switched on, 100% of the time, and it's mentally very exhausting. Yeah. And worse if you start doing this like halfway, which I did a few times. There was one occasion on Saturday where, for the most part, I was all right. There was one occasion when I started talking during a walk-in, and I went to open my mouth, and just nothing came out. And I just turned to Tom, and I was like, "You gotta go, you gotta go." A bit of a nightmare, yeah.
Oh, it's amazing. I hadn't appreciated. I tend to try and attend events in person, so it was fantastic to actually be in Fairfield Halls on Saturday night to see and experience everything. I just think it's such I don't know, it's just a really nice vibe. And took the kids along. There weren't that many kind of younger kids there, but actually my daughter was desperate to see Helena Cravar, which she got to see her and be about a meter from her as she did her walk in and kind of walk out, for the main card, which was amazing. Talk to me about what types of things you're talking about on the walk-ins for the athletes?
Yeah, so just as in what am I talking about? So generally,
Yeah,
we're talking about who they are, a basic breakdown of who they are for the listeners. You're trying to build a bit of a story around the fighters as well. So what is
yeah,
trying to get some context. I would guess story is what gives everything in life context, right? So
yeah,
trying to give a bit of context to the match, and a lot of the things we focus on, or I focus on when I'm doing research for the fighters and stuff like that, is what have their results been on Polaris? What is their story on Polaris?
yeah,
Whether they've competed before. If so, what are the results? Are they competing for the first time? What other things have they done? So that's a pretty basic, but it helps a
yeah.
little bit.
And do you get a chance to meet any of the fighters prior to their walk-ons to kind of know some of their background story, especially if they're new to Polaris?
On some occasions I do, some occasions I don't. On for the last event, I didn't. We usually do some press. I'm usually there for the weigh-ins the day beforehand. I wasn't for this event. So for the last maybe 5 or 6 events, we did live Q&As the day before.
Yeah.
So I would host those as well.
So you've done loads of Polaris events. You also mentioned about Cage Warriors, an MMA promotion. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I have done. I've done quite a few Polarises now. I've probably done, I don't know, maybe 15 or so, maybe more actually. I've done a
Yeah,
lot of Polarises. Cage Warriors I've been doing for a lot less time, but I've done way more events because Polaris have 4 events a year, but Cage Warriors have like 15 or something ridiculous.
yeah,
So I do a lot of Cage Warriors. Cage Warriors is I would say it's like the MMA equivalent of Polaris. So it's a on UFC Fight Pass. It's a much bigger production. A lot more
yeah,
people there because MMA is just a much bigger sport.
yeah,
And as much as we hate to say it, a much more entertaining sport, much better spectating sport than jiu-jitsu is.
yeah,
And I started working for them during COVID actually, because they couldn't. I did an event. I did an event the night that, remember the night that they closed all of the bars and everything. It was like a few days before we
yes,
went into lockdown. I did an
yeah.
event there, like a last minute. They moved it, no audience. It was the first no audience event.
Wow.
And then we got special exemption from the government to run events during COVID. We did lockdown events, and I've been working for them ever since. I've probably done about 50 or 60 shows for Cage Warriors, so
Wow.
a lot. But that's a much easier role because I'm just doing color. I'm just doing mainly grappling analysis for the MMA.
Yeah.
And I work with a guy called Brad Wharton, who's a fantastic presenter and play-by-play guy.
Okay. You
Yeah.
have to explain what color is because you've
Yeah,
now
so
said it a couple of times.
I'm just bringing some color, right? So you kind of,
Okay.
I guess the easy way to say it would be, you have a formal guy.
Yeah.
He's going to do, so for example, for Polaris, hello, welcome to Polaris. This is blah 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 blah. Their record is 3-6, and that, whatever it is, and you're talking through
Yeah.
more of the formal stuff. The technical play-by-play stuff is, oh, he's gone for the takedown, he's doing this, he's doing that, and then
Yeah.
your color stuff is bringing a little bit of color into it, a bit of entertainment. For Polaris, I feel like I can have a bit more fun than I can with Cage Warriors. It's a bit of a
Yeah.
bigger production. I feel like I can't have as much fun with it as I would with Polaris when I'm on color for Polaris, and then doing more of the analysis stuff, and stuff like that. Yeah.
That is very cool, and thank you for explaining.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I was sad not to hear some of the color kind of comments, but being a spectator on the night, a lot of the fighters were having a lot of fun. There was a lot of really positive energy. Did you kind of get that feeling as well?
Yeah, I did. It was, there are different atmospheres on Polaris. The one that we had last night, a couple of nights ago, so on Saturday, it was a really good atmosphere. We had a good crowd.
Yeah.
The guys were having fun. That's not always the case. We had a few Polaris ago. I won't mention which one, but anyone who was there would have.
Yeah.
It just wasn't a good crowd. They just. It was a really bizarre actually. We had a really good card, but the crowd were a little bit dead, and it does change the whole vibe of the event. So if anyone's listening, you do ever go to any live sporting event, but especially a Polaris, make sure that you're contributing to having because it's one of those things where you get out of it as much as you put in. if you
Yeah.
give out some energy, you're gonna
Yeah.
get more energized by everyone else doing the same. So yeah,
Yeah.
the dominoes has to start falling somewhere.
It's amazing. Nia Blackman's mum was sat behind us and was kind of encouraging Nia throughout the whole match, which was just really lovely. And actually, being a mum and hearing, for Nia to hear her mum being so supportive was just kind of a beautiful thing. It was really nice.
It was lovely, and I mean that event was, that match in particular was kind of a crazy one. A title match on Polaris, where the combined age of the two athletes was 37, which is kind of insane. Nia Blackman at 20 years old, being the elder of the two, is not what you expect. But yeah, two super young athletes, really talented, massive future ahead of them. And I've known Nia and the rest of the family for probably 10 years or so. So I've seen her come up through the ranks and turn into the world-class athlete that she is now.
It's so good that you kind of share that. I think, young kids starting off with Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, my two train, we all started training together a couple of years ago. And just, I see the teenage guys and the girls just absolutely making waves on the mats and coming home with trophies, with medals. And it's a great thing to have the next generation and, seeing them come through on big shows like Polaris.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it doesn't happen too often, if kids start a particularly young age, they don't usually continue jiu-jitsu into their late teens and early 20s. So when you get that anomaly that breaks through, usually they're super talented and, they got all of the attributes to really go a long way in the sport.
That's so cool. I want to know now why, when, and how you started training martial arts, because we've kind of gone over the commentating bit. We'll come back to your podcast a bit later, but tell me more about your martial arts journey.
Yeah, I mean, simply put, I was interested in the martial arts sort of as a kid. It was never something that I did very young. So when I was in my early to mid teens, I was interested. I went and tried a load of different martial arts, and none of them really captured me. I ended up going to train some Japanese Jiu Jitsu at a gym called Mill Hill Jiu Jitsu Club. And it didn't really grab me, but I think the reason why I stayed there for a little while is because I was at that age, I was about 14, 15 years old, where I started training in the adults class. So, when you're a 14 or 15-year-old and you're training with adults, it's a bit of a novelty, and it's a bit of it's quite exciting to do. It's quite almost a bit of an honor. So I stuck around and I trained just because it was cool to hang out with adults as a kid. And then after about 3 or 4 months, one of the instructors left, and who would become my proper instructor, Nick Brooks, took over and slowly converted the gym from a Japanese Jiu Jitsu gym, eventually to go to a full Brazilian Jiu Jitsu gym. He was already a blue belt at the time. He was already training under Roger, and he changed the gym over to a full BJJ club, and that's who I trained under. That's where I got my black belt from, and yeah.
So that's been quite a journey from, I guess, a white belt as a teenager through to black belt. How many years does that kind of make up in terms of your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu journey?
As in, how long have I been training Jiu-Jitsu for?
Yes.
Just over 19 years.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's
very
incredible.
long time. Just over, I got my black belt just over 10 years ago.
That's amazing. Do you know, I love hearing the kind of continuous dedication. We start off as white belts, and that takes kind of a massive step to get there. But the more I'm seeing on socials that actually, it's almost your journey begins again as a black belt. Have you found that your journey has kind of restarted or found some new energy to continue through your black belt years?
Yeah, I think people put a lot of gravitas on the black belt, which I think is understandable because it's somewhat of a goal for people to get, but it's a very arbitrary goal, right? It's different for everyone, and it ultimately in the nicest way possible to everyone getting there. By the time you get there, it kind of doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You realize that it's very much just an arbitrary goal. So I wouldn't say that jiu-jitsu starts again at black belt. It's just it starts when you started it and it finishes when you
Yeah.
finish it, and hopefully you never do. So for me, it wasn't that I got my black belt. You know, for me, the only significance of my black belt was that it opened. It was a key for me to get into the door of black belt tournaments, and that's all it was. You know, I was really competing very seriously at the time, and that's all it really meant. I still find stuff nowadays, even 10 years into that black belt, almost 20 years into jiu-jitsu, I still find things that excite me and fascinate me and keep me interested in, you know, even last week, in the last 2 weeks, I've started working on something that is, for me, is just like had everything in my brain, you know, electric and sparking up. And, you know, these happen at various times, and I'm lucky they don't stop. They don't stop, because you get worried that they will be, but there's so much. It's essentially infinite.
Yeah. I love the fact that, you know, you kind of worry that you'll lose the energy or not be able to do it. You know, martial arts or Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is an art. I'm a creative, and, you know, sometimes I fear that creating, you know, I'll lose my intent or my vision or my inspiration to create something. And that's kind of the ongoing kind of loop fear that I go through. And it sounds like maybe martial arts, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is very similar. But kind of commenting on the black belt status, for me as a blue belt, you know, I'm kind of all respect, all honor to every black belt for being there and kind of inspiring the rest of us, which, you know, there's that respect there.
Sure.
You know, maybe one day or maybe not, you know, we're all on this journey, however it kind of flows and ebbs through life and various challenges. When you said about the energy of finding something new, I was learning some cross collar chokes yesterday at kind of a training and open mat, and they were kind of realised that, you know, I was being taught maybe 4 or 5 variations on a cross collar.
Yeah.
That actually, if I skip one move and can't pull it off, then there's an alternative, and there's another alternative, and there's another alternative to submit and finish. And that, for me, as a blue belt yesterday, I felt like my mind was blown, because I've now been kind of immersed into a regular kind of cross collar submission, but now I've got the depth and kind of the substance that means that I can, you know, if I don't submit the first time or the second time or the third time, I've got a fourth option as well, maybe even a fifth. Do you find submissions and moves in the same kind of context? And tell me about your favorite submission.
Well, I think as you get deeper into your jiu-jitsu journey, and look, I can only speak on from my own perspective. I think we're all very individual, so I certainly wouldn't be able to tell you that this is, if you've been training for X amount of years, this is how, you know, this is the perspective that you'll look at jiu-jitsu from, because I have no doubt that it won't be. And the further we go down the journey, the more freedom you have, and the more your own personality and your own way of viewing the world will dictate how you view jiu-jitsu as well. For me, I would assume for most people, because jiu-jitsu is like a language, it's like anything, and the longer you do it, the more depth of the expression there is. So as a blue belt, you're almost without any patronization at all, you're like a child. But as a blue belt, you're, you know, what will be engaging for a child is very different to what's engaging for an adult who has studied a topic for many years. So for you, where it might be, and that's just part of the journey. There will have been a time where I was a blue belt, purple belt, where I would have found a new technique, and there'll be times now where I'll find a new technique and it will be like open the door for me. But I think for me, the beauty of jiu-jitsu is that if you give it 10, 15 years, the things that will be engaging you will be far deeper than seeing a new way to do a technique.
Yeah.
You know, it's much broader than that. It's much bigger than that. For me as well, I think one of the things that is more not unique to me, but is not going to be the experience of the average person who trains jiu-jitsu, which is I have taught jiu-jitsu for 17 years. So I am as much a teacher of jiu-jitsu as I am a practitioner of jiu-jitsu, really, and very arguably more a teacher of jiu-jitsu at the moment than I am. Even though I don't have a gym, I don't teach regularly. I teach a lot of seminars. It's one of the main things that I do. And I spoke to you earlier about I'm a jiu-jitsu communicator. So whether that's teaching seminars or doing commentary or doing a podcast or whatever, I talk a lot. Okay. So when I do jiu-jitsu, it's very clear to me that I experience it through two different eyes. I experience through the eyes of a practitioner and through the eyes of someone who's going to try and relay this information to someone else.
Yeah.
And therefore it doesn't just, it almost doesn't double, but it squares the amount of interest and depth in the sport. So when I'm rolling, I will look at these, I'll discover things that will, as the whole point of rolling, the whole point of sparring is that you're able to test stuff and really integrate and embody and learn, truly learn. You don't learn jiu-jitsu when you get shown a cross choke. You learn jiu-jitsu when you do that cross choke against someone who's resisting against it. That's really when it goes from the front of your brain deep into the rest of your body. Those are the important moments. It's why you can't learn jiu-jitsu from a book or a video. You have to be on the mat doing it.
Yeah.
And so I get those when I learn about doing jiu-jitsu, and then also for me, and sometimes, and it goes through phases. It could be weeks or months of different phases, one way or the other. But I can go through long periods, and very often I'll be doing stuff on the mat, and the epiphanies that I'll be having will be to do with teaching jiu-jitsu and explaining what I'm doing, or concepts or stuff like that, opposed to actually doing jiu-jitsu. So for me, that adds to the intrigue and interest and keeps me entertained, or keeps me very engaged with the sport, even after doing it for so many years.
Cool. I love it. This is the Jiu-Jitsu Lou podcast with me, Lou Temlett, coming to you from the UK. Go and check out the latest video clips over on jiu.jitsu.lu on Instagram. And as you're listening or watching on your favourite podcast platform, I'd really appreciate you dropping the show a rating and a review. Do you own or run a martial arts gym, brand or promotion? How would you like to feature on my new show, Double Mic Takedown Podcast, where you have the opportunity to talk with passion and integrity? You'll be joined by fellow gym, brand and event owners and operators reaching a whole new audience in the UK and around the world. Take the opportunity to join the community by visiting voxiferistudios.com, VOXIFERI studios.com. Today, I'm having a conversation with Dan Strauss. Dan, thank you for sharing everything about the kind of commentating and your martial arts journey, teaching, and kind of time on the mats. Now, I've followed your socials for a while, and there's a lot of content in your cave to do with grip strength and your new book. Tell me about that and where all of this grip stuff has come from.
Sure. Well, yeah, I say if you went onto my Instagram, you'd struggle to know that I did jiu-jitsu at all. There's not too much jiu-jitsu content on there. And that's just because I think, there's one, I don't have a gym, so I'm not generating much jiu-jitsu content out there at the moment. But at the same time, there's plenty of people generating jiu-jitsu content, and I thought I'd do something a little bit more interesting than that, or a little bit different anyway, a little bit more unique. But yeah, the grip training stuff and the strength training stuff. The story of that is very simple. Sorry, my dog is being. Come on then. If you're nice, can he sit here for a bit?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, you can see it only if you're good and you don't distract. Yeah, the grip training stuff. When I started jiu-jitsu, I was very small. I was about 50 kilos when I started training. I was young. I was 14, 15. But even when I started competing in my mid to late teens, I was a very small, skinny kid. And again, I was training with adults. And of course, you get frustrated when you Nobody minds getting beaten up in jiu-jitsu. It's part of it. But
Yep.
if you get beaten up by someone whose skill level is lower than yours, and the only reason that you're getting defeated is because there is a strength imbalance that's very frustrating. And for me, in my teens, that was double frustrating. So I looked for a solution to that, which was to get into some form of strength training. I had no background of any athletic endeavor or sport. I was never an athletic kid. So I was really starting from nothing. So that's what, around about 16, 17, I got into strength training. And obviously, you train jiu-jitsu. One of the most obvious types of strength that you need is indeed grip strength. And I didn't have very strong hands or fingers at the time. So that's what got me into the grip strength training. I've pretty much been doing it ever since. I think grip training is very important, not just for performance on the mats, but for longevity and health on the mats. You know, we can get a lot of injuries in our hands, fingers, wrists, elbows. But also, there's it's a lot of bang for your buck. Grip training. You can get much stronger very quickly, and you can feel the effects of that strength very quickly. If you start doing heavy squats, and don't get me wrong, I love squats. You start doing heavy squats, it's quite a lot of work. It's a lot of central nervous system fatigue. It would certainly be some aching to begin with. And whilst you'll certainly get stronger quite quickly, it takes a little while for that strength to really translate in a palpable way on the mats or in life in general. So grip strength is this unique type of training where it's pretty easy to do, doesn't exhaust you too much, and you feel it pretty quickly.
I know my father is kind of in his 80s, and he has kind of a grip kind of measure. And I know for longevity and strength, actually grip strength is one of the things that's kind of measured as you progress through the years. So it sounds like what you're doing and have done to kind of build up grip strength is not just for jiu-jitsu, but life in general, in kind of building your kind of strength and resilience over time.
Yeah, so a lot of people would have heard of the correlation between grip strength and inverse proportion to grip strength and mortality. So basically, if your grip is good, you have less chance of dying. Now, look, it would be certainly within my interest as a big proponent of grip training to tell people sort of the obvious or what the thing that most people extrapolate from that is that if you train your grip, you'll have less of a chance of dying. That's not the case, unfortunately. The reality is that if you're unwell, if you're weak, then you have a higher chance of. If you're unwell and you're more frail, then your grip strength will be lower. So correlation doesn't equal causation. I'm not going to live forever because I have a really strong grip. But the grip is a fascinating measurement of your general health. So, for example, some people or some organizations will use a grip strength dynamometer, as you said, like a grip measuring device to track the central nervous system fatigue. Every morning you give it a squeeze and you have a baseline. When that baseline starts to drop, you know, it's time to take some extra rest and some recovery protocol and stuff like that. So there is a big correlation between that having a strong grip and the effect that can have over your overall health. But if you train your grip, having a strong grip won't make you last longer, live longer. But if you are healthy when you're older, it's more likely that you have a decent grip. Yeah, and that's probably because you've exercised more when you were younger and stuff like that. Yeah.
So what would be a good kind of grip strength techniques and things to do for anyone in general, maybe specifically training Brazilian Jiu Jitsu?
Yeah, so obviously this is a hard answer for me to give over a short period of time. Wrote a whole book about it.
Go and buy the book.
Go buy the book. Yeah, so that's kind of is the short answer is it's in the book. People go, you wrote a whole book about grip training for jiu-jitsu. It doesn't seem like it's a big enough topic, but it is. And the reason for that is, and sort of the main philosophy of my grip training is that grip comprises a lot more positions and movements than a lot of people think. you know, a lot of people think it's just about, you know, crushing your hand or holding on to something. The reality is there's many different ranges of motion and different types of strength. The hand and wrist and elbow, and especially the fingers and stuff, it's a very complicated, what I would call like a multi-tool. It can create many different shapes and do many different things. And just talking about grip training is sort of as vague as talking about body training. You know, what are you doing? Train your body. Oh, we're doing legs, we're doing push, we're doing pull, we're doing explosive, you know, all of these different things. So there's many different categories of grip training. And this is always what I preach in my, all of the content that I put out, be it my book or my instructional and stuff like that. But the basic stuff, what I say is kind of some of the most important advice is not to necessarily double down on what you're doing in jiu-jitsu. So, for example, say in the gi, you're doing a lot of holding on to something.
Yeah.
You can then go to the gym and do more holding on to things like farmer's walks, dead hangs, heavy deadlifts, stuff like that. All exercises that I recommend. But what we actually want to be doing with a lot of our strength and conditioning work, a lot of the work that we do outside of our sport, is not just trying to improve the performance of the movements that we're doing in the sport, but trying to create more balance and not further create imbalances that can be created in the sport. So, for example, a lot of squeezing and holding onto things in jiu-jitsu, and what we really need is to work more extension of the wrist, extension of the fingers, to create more of a balance in the forearm and avoid stuff like tennis elbow and stuff like that. So there are a lot of different ways to train the grip. Hard to give you over a podcast. But I try and give as many as I try and give as many. I don't just want your money. I've given loads away for free on my Instagram as well.
It's so good. I think when you mention balance, it's having all of the range of motions. And I think I hadn't really consciously thought about, you know, our hands being multi-tools. Actually, we can do so many different things, you know, kind of extend, stretch, and it's not just our hands, it's kind of the whole arm. It's complex. So I get it. Yeah,
it is. And the same is true of any strength conditioning, what you're doing for jiu-jitsu in general, not just the hands. You know, let's say, for example, you think I'm doing a lot of pulling and I'm doing a lot of compression work in my jiu-jitsu. So you go, I'm going to go into the gym and I'm going to do more pulling and more compression work. And you can then start to create even bigger issues. Whereas if you want to be full body strong, yes, train the stuff that you want to get stronger for jiu-jitsu, but also train the stuff that isn't going to be worked as much in jiu-jitsu so that you can maintain a good functionality all around.
Yeah. One of the things for me in going from being a white belt to a blue belt, I was gripping on for dear life to collars and cuffs and things. And then my grip got ripped so many times. I'm like, I'm not having this. I'm not playing the grip game. You can have my grips. I will go and do something else. So my mindset's kind of moved away from avoiding injury, shall we say.
Yeah, look, unless you're planning on being a professional that's going to make money from competing, the goal in jiu-jitsu is a marathon, not a sprint. The goal should be on the mat for as long as possible and as healthy as possible. And it's another thing that I talk about. I talk about it all the time. I talk about it in the book as well. George Hackenschmidt, a great wrestler, strongman back in the old days, on the good old days. You know, he said strength can never be, or health can never be divorced from strength. You've got to be healthy in order to be strong. And unless there's a good trade-off to sacrificing your health in order for performance, it's very important to try and balance those two things.
Yeah. Wise words. Now, I've seen you have all sorts of devices and maces and all sorts of things in your cave. What's the most kind of intricate or your favorite thing at the moment?
Oh, well, yeah, I do have many things. I have a terrible collection habit. I received this from my father. He's got, you know, a big stamp collection. He loves to, you know, I think it runs in the family, unfortunately. My father's father was a bit of a hoarder as well. So we don't like the term hoarder. Collector is the term that we prefer. But yeah, I have a big collection, and it's quite funny because I started out training essentially as a ultra minimalist setup, you know, DIY'd a lot of stuff. And I really didn't have much equipment at all. And I just consistently built it over the years. And now it's one of the most, you know, packed, most supplied home gyms that you'll ever see. In terms of equipment that I love at the moment, my favorite one, I got it only a couple of weeks ago. You know, if you ask me in a year, it might not still be the same thing. But this new club that I've got, which you may or may not have seen, or the people listening may or may not have seen, is a solid bronze training club, and it's modeled off of. I'm a big fan of mythology, and especially Greek mythology. So I have quite a lot of mythology-based training tools, which sounds weird. And this one is based off of a tool from, or an item from, the myth of Theseus. He defeats this giant who has a bronze club, and then he keeps his bronze club. So I had this bronze club cast, and it's this thick, unwieldy 20-kilo club. But I am just absolutely in love with this thing. I just want it in my hands all the time, and it's so awkward and heavy. But every time you can just do anything with it. You just move it. If you move it, you're getting stronger, and it's almost a little bit. I like with your strength and conditioning stuff. You don't want to get too down the route, or I don't think you should anyway. Get too down the route of trying to mimic your sport in your strength and conditioning work. But I also quite like when you do something that doesn't necessarily mimic it, but gives a similar feeling or energy. So, for example, when I do sandbag work, I really like training with sandbags. And there's some exercises that you can do with sandbags. You do a long set, and you go, it feels like I've just had an intense 5-minute roll with someone. And that's kind of, that feels great.
Nice.
And this club just feels like every time I'm wielding it, I feel like I'm wrestling with someone who doesn't want me to grab them. So that's probably my favorite tool right now.
I like the reference to Greek mythology. I was more going Captain Caveman, to be honest, Dan.
Well, that's what it looks like. Aesthetically, it's a bit more of a caveman thing, but clubs are very interesting in general. You can't get me talking too much about mythology and clubs and history and stuff like that. But I mean, clubs are, you know, one of the clubs are the oldest weapon that humans ever had. You know, essentially. That was the OG whack someone around the head with a heavy stick sort of situation. But clubs have also been used as a strength training tool for thousands of years. They in many cultures used clubs to train to be able to wield their weapons better. And you know, if you look at both the main cultures that still have quite who are still pretty heavy on the club stuff is Indian wrestling, Pavani stuff, and Iranian wrestling. Both of them use slightly different types of clubs, but both of them use this circular training movement to help prepare their bodies to grapple.
Cool. I like the idea of finding an exercise or a strength and conditioning technique that echoes some of the moves that we, you know, use on the mats. I think that's quite clever. For me, I'm using my kind of 40 plus years of dancing and my kind of core base, and kind of, you know, I was complimented on my crossface by a black belt a couple of weeks ago, and then I had to go and look up what crossface was as an innocent blue belt.
Yeah.
Before we finish up, Dan, please alleviate my query with the ripping pack of cards in half.
Yeah.
Please.
Okay. What is the query? Just what on earth are you doing?
Yes.
Okay. So the tearing a deck of cards is a classic old time strongman feat of strength. It's been around for a long time, and it's just a stupid thing that I do sometimes, and it's fun. It's one of those things where I think it fascinates people because there's some relatedness for a lot of people, whereas with a lot of the stuff that you're lifting, if you see me lift a 20-kilo club, you don't actually have any idea what that feels like. I had someone come yesterday and they felt it and they go, you really need to have people feel this, because they don't, when they watch the video, they don't understand how this feels. You know, it's a heavy club. Or, you know, even if I was to do a 300-kilo deadlift, the people who understand, not that I can do a 300-kilo deadlift, don't get me wrong, but if I was to deadlift 300 kilos or pick up a 150-kilo sandbag, only the people who have done that sort of training have really any concept of what that might feel like. Whereas everyone's held a deck of cards and they can understand, you know, what it must, what is required to tear it. You know, same with nail bending or horseshoe bending, all of these different things where it bridges the gap between the strength training and the late man, basically. Yeah, but really, I just do it for fun.
I love it. There's a sense of magic about it as well, of course.
There's a sense of magic. I need to work out a magic trick that I can combine where, I don't know, you pick a card and I rip the deck, and the only card that's not ripped is your card, something like that.
That would be incredible.
Exactly,
Dan, how can people follow your journey and see you ripping a pack of cards and your 20-kilo club?
Yep. So the best way is on Instagram. My handle is @raspberry_ape. I do have a website. I have quite a few products out at the moment, and you can pretty much find all of them at apeacademyonline.com. And I have some instructionals, some jiu-jitsu instructionals. I have some strength training instructionals, grip training, and sandbag training. And I have my book. You can buy my book on Amazon. It's called The Grappler's Guide to Grip Training, or the ebook. Both of those, you can find the link on apeacademyonline.com. And also a program that I've just dropped to get you nice, big, strong forearms for jiu-jitsu or just for looking good. So that's the main place. And if you want to reach out to me and message me, the best place is probably just to shoot me a message on Instagram. That's where I spend most of my day.
Amazing. All of the links will be in the show notes. Dan, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And
my pleasure.
Look forward to seeing you on the next Polaris.
Absolutely. Great to chat to you, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for telling your friends about this show. And as soon as the show ends, I'd really appreciate you dropping the show a rating and a review. Thanks again for listening. Catch you on the next episode of the Jiu Jitsu Lou podcast.